Thank you so much. Good evening and welcome to the February 21st, 2023 meeting of the McMinnville Water and Light Commission. I'd like to call the meeting to order and ask our clerk, Trina McManus, to do a roll call.
Yes, Mayor Drapkin,
Here.
Commissioner Tankersley,
Here.
Commissioner Gormley,
Here.
Commissioner Christensen,
Here.
Commissioner Tate.
Here. Wonderful. And if all commissioners have had an opportunity to review the consent agenda and don't wish to have anything pulled off it, I would entertain a motion to approve it.
I would so move.
I'll second. I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley and a second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And the consent agenda passes unanimously. Next, we'll go to our accounts payable and purchasing reports.
Nothing here.
Thank you. Any?
Here.
Nothing. Wonderful. And so no actions needed this time. And we will then, we're going to actually move up our new employee introductions and invite John Spence to introduce our new employee, Jesse Ainsley.
Jesse. Thank you. I'd like to introduce Jesse Ainsley. He's our newest meter reader.
Welcome aboard.
He's been with us almost 2 months now and just about ready to finish up training and start on his own at the beginning of the month. So we're excited to have him as part of our group.
Welcome.
Wonderful. Welcome. Would you like to tell the commission a bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm from Hillsborough, moved here about a year ago. Really enjoy the smaller side of the city. I worked as a utility locator before this, so kind of had experience working out in the field. I've kind of enjoyed learning all the new stuff here. Haven't worked with water before, so that was it.
Wonderful. And we'll introduce ourselves to you as well. We just briefly met. I'm Remy Drapkin. I'm the mayor of McMinnville and member of the Water and Light Commission. I'm a McMinnville native and been in public service here for 12 years.
I'm Tom Tankersley, been a commissioner for a long time, lived here for a long time and enjoy it. I'm glad you're joining our employees. I really enjoy working with our employees.
That's a nice way of putting it. Yeah. I'm Jody Christensen. I'm Special Projects Manager at the City of McMinnville, and I've served on the Water and Light Commission since January 2019. She said confidently.
Nice job. I'm Kathy Tate. I've been on the commission for a couple of years and I'm a longtime resident here in McMinnville and it's nice to have you aboard.
I'm Ed Gormley. My family is a plumbing, heating, and mechanical contracting business here in McMinnville. And I've been on the commission for a couple of years. I have to tell you that you are in a really interesting position. Do dogs bother you at all? Snakes, things like that?
And snakes.
We haven't had to go to commission.
Well, you aren't reading water meters, you're reading electric meters. Is all. Anyway, this will be a little bit of fun. You have an unbelievable opportunity to rise up in this company. We've had folks that have done that many, many times, and we even had a commissioner once that, I shouldn't say commissioner, we had said someone left this position and became a county commissioner. So, used to have political aspirations. That's a big side story about that. Going from unpaid to paid. Anyway, glad to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, guys.
And if we could now hear a report from Mason Bruce Gerard and from Brent Keller about our upcoming or about the timber sale bids, please.
Not scary.
Thank you, Mayor. As far as the 2022 stumpage sales, reforestation is underway on Powerline West, Powerline East. We've had some interruptions with the weather. We have some snow coming in this week up high. So we're working on it and we'll get through it. It's going real good so far. We've interplanted a few units and we're starting on the full plant of these sales from last year. So we're in good shape as far as the schedule goes. Powerline West sale unclosed is a copy of an email to Murphy Company from Oregon Department of Revenue that I think sufficiently serves as proof that they've paid their harvest taxes. This is actually how we used to check and see if they paid. We'd call up Oregon Department of Revenue and give them the notification number, and they'd tell us yes or no. And then they stopped letting us know that for privacy rules or whatever. So I think the buyer can, or the owner of the timber can still get that information. So this is how they provided the proof. This has been done different ways over the years. So I think this is sufficient proof, and this would complete the contractual obligations by Murphy Company for the Powerline West sale. So I'd recommend release of the performance payment bonds and the cash deposit of $25,000 at this time.
You have a resolution or you have?
It would just be a motion to release the
Also moved.
performance and payment bonds on the Powerline West timber sale and release the cash deposit back to Murphy Company.
I have
Thank
a
you.
motion from Commissioner Gormley,
Second.
a second from Commissioner Tate. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. And the motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And it seems.
Then we're
Oh,
very much looking forward to the 2023 program, and we had a bid opening last Wednesday, February 8th. You can see in the attached enclosed memo on page 29 a rundown of the bidders. We had 5 total bidders. No bidder bid on both sales, and we didn't have a lot of bids this time, but we had some good bids. And Boise Cascade just nosed out Hampton to be high bidder on 187 road sale, and Herbert Lumber put a real good price on the 303 road sale. So we've worked with both these buyers before several times.
Herbert would be the dimension one for houses.
Yeah, so I'd recommend, I don't know if there's any questions about the bids or the buyers, but I'd recommend accepting the high bids of each sale and awarding them accordingly.
are there any questions from the commission at this time?
No.
Also moved.
I have a motion from Commissioner Gormley.
And I'd recommend this language if we.
Please.
Could you help me with this motion,
Sure.
please, sir?
So I'd recommend a motion to accept the high bid from Boise Cascade at $543.23 per 1,000 board feet for the $543.28 per 1,000. I get that right?
Board feet.
Per 1,000 board feet for the 187 road timber sale, and accept the high bid from Herbert Lumber of $869.17 per 1,000 board feet for the 303 road timber sale, subject to the issuance of a notice of intent to award and no protest being filed, and direct staff to direct necessary contract documents to draft necessary contract documents. And if no protest is filed, upon receipt of the required bonds, deposit, and insurance documents, authorize the mayor and clerk to execute the timber contracts.
Thank you for the assistance. My voice was kind of weak.
So moved. Yeah, so motion from Commissioner Gormley.
I'll second.
And we have a second from Commissioner Christensen. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed, say nay. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Very good. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Take care.
You bet. Bye-bye.
Now invite up Jamie Phillips, our Power Resource Manager, to present. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to give the commission a bit of an update regarding our post-2028 power contract negotiations with BPA, and provide some context where we are in the process, what's to come, and sort of the highlight the areas that are being targeted at this time, and also just maybe have a regular update with the commission going forward over the next few years. There's going to be a lot coming at us regarding power contracts. So wanted to start by providing a little background. McMinnville currently purchases power from Bonneville under a power purchase agreement that was signed in 2008 for a 20-year term. And that is often referred to as a regional dialogue contract. There's the process leading up to those contracts. So you'll probably hear that term going forward. The current contract expires September 30th, 2028. So we've actually started a few years ago with Bonneville, providing input. Bonneville reached out to customers, trying to gather information, to start discussions and kind of figure out what customers were looking for post 2028. And so this next contract is now coined the provider of choice, post 2028 provider of choice process. And Bonneville kicked off regional conversations with utilities. And throughout the process, McMinnville has been engaged with our trade associations that advocate for public power, the Public Power Council and Northwest Requirements Utilities mainly. So that helps to sort of align ideas, provide a louder voice and more organized input to BPA for the region. And toward the end of 2021, Public Power realized collectively that we needed to have a louder voice to begin with. So undertook a few-month process to develop concepts and priorities for the coming contracts and presented that to BPA last spring in what's called the provider of choice or public power concept paper. And BPA took that into consideration and incorporated it into its own concept paper released last summer. That sort of was the kicking off point for contract framework, concepts, priorities, what the contract looks like, tiered rate methodology, product choices. So over the last several months, we've intensified the schedule of workshops and meetings, input from Public Power, and it's sort of been this back and forth to try to kind of narrow down this set of principles and goals that Public Power is interested in pursuing in the post 2028 contract. Where we are today in the process is this workshop schedule that will carry through the spring, and come July, BPA is expected to release a draft record of decision for the policy framework of the next contracts. From there, they'll have some meetings to kind of dive into the details and then kick off actual contract negotiations with customers. That's projected to take more than a year. And the expectation is that McMinnville should have hopefully a power contract to sign by the end of 2025.
Oh, fantastic.
For power service beginning October 1st, 2028. So
Jamie, have they issued any kind of commitment letter to our association that they're going to be true as, because I think they've got the potential that we could spend 3 years talking about stuff and then they could say, here's the price. And so I don't have any sense of, because
yes,
you could a new person be appointed or
right.
so.
Right. So BPA and the administrator, have broad discretion on this sort of thing. However, I think it's in everyone's best interest to collaborate and for BPA to really consider Public Power's position on things. Public Power represents a large portion of their customer base and the majority.
Yeah, it's 70% of the revenue.
So there's the more important is for Public Power to align, I think, and to have and I think we've done right.
So to go along with that, so over the last month, I guess, there's been a group that's met Public Power executives to kind of get everybody, kind of herd the cats. Because there's a lot of issues that individual utilities have. Specifically, some have issues with conservation and they spent dollars on conservation that they didn't get credit for. They want credit for that on their high water marks or on their slice of the system. There's others that have load growth significantly above their high water mark. They want more BPA power to lower the cost. There's lawn growing utilities that are saying, hey, time out. Why do we want to pay for your load growth in the system by augmenting the system, making the system bigger? So there's all these issues just within public power that we're trying to work on.
So does it come up at all about the reliability and the lack of maintenance?
That actually, yeah. That's actually, more of that is tied to the transmission system. This is the power contract.
Okay.
But the question, to answer your question, yes, that has come up many times. And actually,
all the power we want.
how do you get it to
deliver it?
the right? And actually,
Yes.
that's an issue that we're struggling with right now, because BPA wants to take a 2-week outage on our transmissions, 2 weeks on the south side. So basically, we'd be single line for most of town. And we're saying like we're not comfortable with that. So what's the plan? What's your backup plan?
So Jimmy, here's really reaching. Do you have any sense of what the rate might be in 28?
You do.
The reason I ask that is, as this rate continues to go, is there at some point where we cross with solar and all of a sudden Bonneville loses? Because I mean, one of the reasons I put solar is because the rates are so cheap, but at some point, is there going to be return? And I don't see solar. I mean, it's a free fix. It's all driven by tax credit. I would worry about if we price it too high and all of a sudden, which really impinges on their, all of a sudden they can't sell it. They're not selling it.
So that is incorporated into the conversation. Now, I will say that the federal hydro system is fully subscribed. So there's limited hydropower available and there's plenty of takers. So we, as a load following preference customer, we get a share of that called our contract high water mark. And so some of those foundational elements that we have in our current contract will carry forward. That has already been agreed that we'll continue with the tiered rates construct. So we'll have the tier 1 for the federal based system, tier 2 for anything above your high water mark load. And BPA is working out how to serve that, what that looks like. Is it a green product? Is it new resources? Is it surplus hydro? And what rates make sense there? And so making sure that these cost buckets are true to the product, and that integrity of the federal base, the hydro system, the preference power is maintained at the lowest rate possible.
And so Jamie hit the key words was load following. So if we had to have our own resource, there are significant costs that we would have to bear on that too, because BPA is essentially matching our load at any instant in time with their resources. So if we had, if you assume we had a large resource here that we were doing that with, there are significant other costs that we would have to bear for those kind of resources.
So within your group, is there any discussion about the political aspect of efforts being made to outlaw gas?
Electrification in general, providing, leading to load growth is a big concern, because a lot of utilities who maybe aren't load following are out there trying to build resources or procure resources to serve some future load that may or may not be measurable at this point, and that gas is part of that. Increasing electric load in the region is a big concern.
And really, I think from my perspective, the bigger issue is the transmission grid. Because the current transmission grid is constrained in many places. And that's just going to make those challenges even greater. So we would have to build new transmission to meet those loads. And to build new transmission, I know there's what they call the B2H project, which is Boardman to Hemingway, is a 500 kV line. And that's been in the works over 10 years and it's still not built yet.
but they did finally make some
They
progress.
did make some
So,
progress on that. So
there's
that
that.
was, yeah, but it's still not built. I mean, it's
Right.
still at least 2 or 3 years away from even being built.
Yeah.
So here's an interesting factoid. I know this firsthand from being involved in it, but PGE is under this huge effort to
Green up there.
manage all electric water heaters with some smart device. And the legislature had kind of blocked it for a while, and now it's come.
Demand
back.
response.
Yeah, demand response.
Yeah.
They estimate that they can save up to 70 megs of power by doing that. And it's really, but it's primarily going up to heat pump water heaters. And
So I don't know if
So-
you remember, we actually used to do that here.
I do, because I think I told you when I was an apprentice that I go out with one of the old plumbers and somebody's water heater quit working, and there was that
Little
device right
round
there.
box with 2 switches in it.
It looked like, it looked like the old mercury switches we played
They
with
were,
as kids
they were.
from wash machines.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what they were. And that's how because we used to do our own power
Send
here.
a signal, yeah.
So we could actually disable water heaters for a certain amount of time.
And then one day we got some letter in the bond bill saying, shut your generators down, or,
Yep, we're good. We don't need you. We don't need that anymore. Yep.
and we were the first city ever to have power. Yeah, I mean, just lots of crazy dynamics there. And then we're seeing some really big applications of the CO2 water heaters or heat pumps. I mean, we're talking doing the apartments and stuff,
Really.
huge. Mhm. We put a couple in some retirement centers. They
Well,
seem to work.
That's one of the reasons in our strategic plan, we wanted to do the integrated resource plan so that we can start identifying resources that we're gonna need to meet our above high water mark load.
right. And the answer may be BPA.
Yeah.
But we need to explore everything and the landscape is changing in ways that we know and can identify, but also we can't necessarily quantify it right now. And so trying to project out through 2048 is a fun challenge. So we are, but I think we're satisfied that BPA can serve McMinnville in the best way going forward. So we may supplement with other resources or invest in other things if that makes sense. But as far as sort of the foundational elements of our current power service, I think those will remain. We'll be a load following customer. We're going to continue, BPA is going to continue with tiered rates. Customers agree that's the best way to maximize the value of the system. And the products are going to look similar. So load following, slice, block, that looks the same. Tier 2 products, still working that out, but the general framework will continue. A few items that I just wanted to highlight, and as we go through this, I'll try to dole out these acronyms and definitions and terms in small quantities so that you're not inundated with. Yeah.
Called later a second, what does this mean again?
But as we go forward, these are things that you're going to hear a lot, starting with contract high water mark. And that is McMinnville's or any customer's sort of share or allocation of the tier 1 system. And that's going to be dependent on a formula that is still kind of being decided, but essentially it'll take our net requirement of BPA. So our forecasted need minus our existing resources, which is currently Grant County and likely Riverbend, although we're looking for some accommodation there because our Riverbend contract expires in 2030. And then it'll be scaled down to the size of the system, which is the next bullet there. BPA has to determine what the available capacity of the system is for the contract or for a rate period. Into the next contract, BPA is proposing not to have rate period or rate period high water marks where the system is resized every 2 years, and we're given, it will be set at the beginning. There will be a set system size. So system size is so the whole hydro system, 31 dams and the Columbia Generating Station the total capacity is somewhere upwards of 10,000 average megawatts. Is that right? 10,000? Yeah. However, they set the system size somewhere lower than that. And currently it's at the they call it P10. So it's the 10th percentile over the last 30 years of what those facilities have produced. So it's usually around 7,000. That's kind of what BPA is proposing. And that may fudge a little bit with augmentation, which is your third bullet point. And augmentation is sort of.
Before you go on, if they don't change that, don't recalibrate that every 2 years, what are they going to do
Either way.
if their capacity goes down? For instance,
Yes.
water or a dam gets taken out,
Right.
or some of their wind power goes away.
Sure. So the wind isn't considered in tier 1. So it's hydro and the nuclear at CGS. But hydro can vary, and that's part of the reason why they set that critical water level so much lower than the actual. So P10, the 10th percentile of the last 30 years, really kind of limits the risk of that happening. But if it did, I'm sure there's going to be provisions for that in the contract, and customers would all be scaled pro rata, most likely.
And would there be provisions that if for some reason the capacity of the system went up, either more efficient generators or something that the tier 1 would go up to?
Not likely. However, customers are pushing for that surplus to be available at the tier 1 rate as a separate product. So our contract high water mark wouldn't change, but we're looking for ways to be able to tap into that, and so that it's not just sold on the market, so that preference customers have first right to that at the tier 1 rate. But it wouldn't necessarily change our contract high water mark.
Right. Okay. So you could buy it if it were there. And they'd have to figure out a way to allocate it.
Right. Yeah. So that all has to be determined, but that's not something we can do today. And that's something going in the next contract that customers really want to see.
Jamie, we hear about the removal of the lower Snake River dams. Is that likely to have any kind of impact on that?
It certainly could. All assumptions are, everything is assuming that those dams remain. All this conversation assumes that those 1,000 megawatts are still intact. If they're not, if they are removed at some point, that's a much bigger conversation beyond just contracts.
Okay.
And that would have to go through, that would have to be legislated.
So, hard to say, but we're assuming they're going to stay in these conversations.
And actually, I think, aren't those some of the lowest costs in the federal system?
I don't know that.
I think there are. I think they were around 10. Some of those projects are around $10 a megawatt hour.
Jamie, when do we have the last of the Walnut Dam power, Grant County Power?
We're currently, it's when their FERC licenses expire. So currently it's 20, they're on 2 different time frames, but I think it's 2048 and 2052. 50 and 52.
50-year contracts.
50-year, yeah. So they're likely gonna try to renew their FERC license. So as long as they have that,
And try to cut us.
then our contract remains. And
Try to cut us back.
Like last night.
Yeah.
Well, and we haven't talked about Grant is actually wants BPA power now that they hadn't had in the past.
Interesting. Their loads increased that much.
Yeah. So they're looking for a slice of the system now. So that's putting more pressure on how the system's
It's
allocated.
the cheapest power forever.
Well, yeah,
And I have a vague recollection from the relicensing of those dams. That, that they had, as they needed more power, they had a right to cut us back. Was that just at the relicensing, or was that as we go forward?
Well, at least through 2028, it's the same, and
Right, they can't, okay,
Right.
but after 2028, will our share of Grant County go down?
not that I'm aware of.
Okay, there was something,
I thought so.
yeah, but I know they took some from the bigger utilities. I think they ended up.
our share went down too. I
Yeah,
know.
it went down too.
But I don't know if it
we
was just,
still got
if that
some.
happens every 50 years or if that, but I have a vague recollection that they could maybe do it at intervals.
I can check.
Thank you,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not aware of that.
So there's a lot more to come on this.
Yes,
This
Right.
is a huge issue.
this is great. I think I'd appreciate if you keep doing this.
Yeah, we'll
Sure.
try and do this every, couple of months as we get updates and things.
So
Yeah.
Jamie and John, you think it's worth maybe setting aside some money to do some research on alternatives to Bonneville or the loss of Grant Power? And I still, the high head hydro thing, there's nothing in our licensing that keeps us from doing that, I don't think.
Or McGuire.
Yeah,
So that's what we're gonna look at in the integrated resource plan. We're
okay.
gonna look at all.
But actually hire somebody to give us a tentative design, it's a
Yeah.
real.
We're gonna do and see if there's things available there, because we know there are things like in the pipe type
Yeah,
things, but they're not a lot of power. But, is there wind potential? Is there something in McGuire where we could potentially generate something? So and other places that we don't know about.
But previously, the cost of it was such that, and the product was too expensive, but as we start ramping up, then it may end up being feasible.
It's kind of like the thought process that when the commission purchased Grant back in
Sure.
1950, it was higher than what we were doing here, even generating our own, but then that shifted at some point and became one of our cheapest resources.
It is our cheapest.
Can you imagine trying to fire a bunker C oil plant right now? Worst carbon.
So the other thing to kind of follow up on what Ed and you were talking about is that I could see where at some time as we get. So we're having to buy tier 2 power and if unlike today, the tier 2 power is quite a little bit more expensive, like we always thought it would be. Some conservation things that wouldn't necessarily pencil otherwise
May pencil, right?
may pencil because you compare them not with the Bonneville tier 1 rate, but with the tier 2 rates and so we might want to subsidize conservation even more, looking at it that way.
And we may want to do demand response again too.
Yeah, as well as demand response or all these different things that don't make sense now. And wouldn't make sense if you just had tier 1 power, may make sense if you have tier 2.
So you may want to mention what happened in this next rate period with the tier 2. and
The
price.
rate.
Yeah.
Well, you mentioned that, market prices have been lower than we anticipated prior to this contract, and that has started to shift where the market is now high comparatively, and for the next rate period starting in October, under this contract, the tier 2 rate is $60 as compared to 30 to whatever currently. So we're seeing that and those
Just
that
what we
rate
always thought would happen.
right, that rate is based on projections. So anyway,
Is there any discussion about the Willamette River dams? I know the Snake River dams are getting a lot of attention, but we know they're carbon neutral, and so there's a lot of advocacy to keep those in place. The Willamette River dams, I understand, actually lose money for BPA every year, as well as affecting the fish populations fairly significantly, and that there are requests out there not to remove them, but to release more water. But I think Army Corps of Engineers predicts a $714 million loss to BPA over the next 30 years.
So.
that effort to decommission those dams, specifically, I think it's Big Cliff and Detroit. This point,
Cougars in there too for power.
Okay. Because they are more costly than, they're just very inefficient as far as dollars go. And so the power generated from those facilities is not worth the cost to maintain and operate them.
So when you say decommission, would they cease to generate power?
The generation,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
So that's working through DC, like you may get to
Yeah. we make-
talk about that
Yeah.
next week, yeah.
Because what the problem there is that it's the cost to put in the fish mitigation or the passage to those dams. They're talking at I think it was over $1 billion.
But don't they have to do that anyway, even if they don't generate power?
Correct. That's why we want to decommission. Exactly.
Oh, I
Then
see.
it
So,
becomes,
so let somebody, let the irrigators or the flood control.
Let
pay for
yeah,
those.
but because what typically happens is the way these projects work is they,
He
when
said the word.
when the projects go in, they allocate the cost of the projects to the various phases,
Mhm.
and they tend not to ever look at those again.
Yeah.
And so what's happened over time is those have shifted and changed. And so one of the other things that we've been working with is trying to get them to redo those allocations, because what's happening is the ratepayers are paying a disproportionate share of the cost compared to the taxpayers for the other uses like flood control, irrigation, recreation, and trying to get those more aligned with what the costs are per each of those.
While the hydropower aspect itself loses money.
Of
Right.
those, right, but in the bigger projects, there's more dollars tied to those, so they can spread those costs over more, more megawatt hours.
Yeah.
So it's kind of this, it's an interesting, and then the other thing that's part of what's going on with this is looking at an upgrade of CGS. Adding another 170 megawatts roughly of power output of that project. And bringing that into the tier 1 system, because they're estimating that cost would be about $30 a megawatt hour.
The nuclear plant in
The
Hanford.
Columbia.
Generate stations.
Is that?
That's the old whoops number 2.
It's
The nukes.
That's an
a reservation.
Yes.
Yeah, reservation.
Oops, too.
And so Washington Public Power Supply System,
That's a horrible.
bad acronym.
And so that kind of goes, thanks for the segue on that explains augmentation. So that is increasing the size of the federal system, and CGS upgrade is one way to get there. So
It would get a portion of it, and it's not, because I, with it, 480 some odd megawatts is what they need to augment the system to make everybody's high water mark. So we're short, so that's.
So in your meetings, has it been discussed at all, the strides that nukes have made with?
small modulars.
Small, yes, I mean, that's around the world, that's being looked at all over.
Yes.
And OHSU and, no, but OSU.
OSU, yeah, Corvallis,
Company that-
new scale. It's the
Yeah,
company there.
they're finally hitting it.
So
Yeah.
UAMPS has signed an agreement with New Scale to look at design, but the problem that's happened is costs of that have just exploded, like everything. Construction costs, I can't remember the numbers, but it's billions of dollars more.
Yeah, per megawatt, I mean, that's gonna be the most expensive resource at this point, but
But the thing they're able to do with these is turn them in 2 to 3 years, where before it was taking 6 to 10 years to go, and they
Well,
turn these so quick.
Yeah, they're 50 megawatt modules, the new
Plug
scale,
and play stuff, yeah.
so they can do up to, I think, 11 modules
Mhm.
chained together.
scale to your
Yeah.
need.
Scale to your need.
So fast.
Yeah, there's a lot of potential there.
I mean, the Koreans and GE or somebody.
I think. There's only new scales design has actually been approved by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. But I don't think the others have been there.
There's like 10 or 12 licensing applications around.
But again, that's the problem that happened with nuclear the last time, is that there were so many different designs.
Yeah.
That nothing was standardized. And so, like the French, who have, most of their power comes from nuclear.
Yeah.
They all have standardized designs. So every
And
plant's the same.
small, not these giant things that we do, so. It's not very repeatable.
Yeah.
Exciting, I mean,
Yeah.
just fun thing.
Okay,
It's definitely an interesting time.
so I'll be back frequently with updates, and I'll throw in a few acronyms or terms for you here and there, and
This is exciting.
gear up for more in-depth contract negotiations in the next year.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Great information.
All right, and now we're gonna follow up from our previous meeting with the Marshland property discussion. And turn this over to
Kind of up to you. Do you want to take the personal services agreement?
Oh, sorry,
Maybe
I
just-
skipped over it. I put a check mark next to the wrong thing.
Mm.
Yeah, no, we can start with the personal service, personnel services. agreement.
So, back in, I think it was August. We did the contract with BDS for the strategic plan. As we were going through that plan, the draft plan, one of the items that was obviously one of the biggest items was the relationship between water and light and the city. So I asked BDS to come back with a proposal to facilitate some type of meetings and try to get everybody on the same page, set up defined roles and responsibilities of both the council and and water and light. They came back with a price of $12,500 for that work, but I also wanted to add in some travel expenses because it's changed a little bit as far as the dynamics. We were originally going to do those and try and do them when they were here with our strategic plan, but now scheduling's not working, so I'm requesting that the commission authorize me to enter into an agreement with them for $17,500 to cover travel expense as well.
Have you talked to?
I have not talked to Jeff about that portion yet, but I will.
So it'd be up to 17.
Up to $17,500, yes. It may be less than that
And
based on.
That number split with the city
Yeah.
or, okay.
Currently, the
12,000
12,500 is split with the city.
But since we've had a change with the travel, I'll talk to Jeff. He's not, I guess he's traveling right now, so.
Yes.
Yeah, so, and I'm hoping that we can still kind of tie in some of those meetings.
Yeah.
With some of our other ones, so we can keep those.
That's great.
Do you think this is a real strain for the city to try and come up with another $2,000 or $3,000?
I mean, everything is a bit of a strain financially right now for the city, is the fact of the matter. I don't know, I don't remember what line item this is. I don't remember what it's coming out of when we discussed it. At a 50-50 split at the 12,500, Jeff felt it was totally manageable within our budget cycle, even though we are kind of, on the last.
I mean,
I think it'll be less than that because I'm going to try and get the meetings together.
Can any of it be done virtually?
A lot of it will be at risk. And I'll talk with you. Hopefully before next week.
well, I mean, I don't want us to not do this because that.
Right, I think it's
I don't want that to
important
be an
enough.
issue. I mean, really, I don't.
Yeah, I don't either. I just don't want to commit
Yeah,
additional.
no, I understand. I mean,
At least for the 12,500,
we have to make the freight up.
we may have to pick up a little bit if.
And you may
Mayor's-
want to
mayor's
look
expense
at
account there, by the way.
doing.
That's a
virtual
pretty low
meetings.
line item. I don't know how you justify it.
I think, the split.
She said some of it is, I don't know.
And you've got some of it as virtual.
Yes.
Yeah.
They're gonna be making phone calls to all of you, plus the city council, and I think there's actually one meeting in there that's virtual. Is that right, Trina? I don't remember exactly I know the individuals are
The phone calls, yes, and then we're trying to line it up for them to have one of the meetings in person when they come to make the final presentation on water and light strategic plan sometime in April, that they would then do their first meeting as a joint group at that point, and then they would come back one additional time after that.
So, how are we gonna leave this tonight? So,
Okay, it's a bit of a moving target, but what I would suggest that the commission consider approving an increase of the contract of the max price of the BDS contract up to $62,500 and a termination date to move to June 30th of 2023 and direct the general manager and authorize the general manager to approve a form of amendment number 1 and authorize the mayor and clerk to sign. We don't have that. Well, we actually have worked up a draft of it. I think essentially
that's
you're
based
getting-
on us picking up that extra.
yeah, you'd be authorizing the whole full dollar amount. At least authorizing the general manager to do that and authorizing him to approve a form of
I
contract.
think,
I'll,
I think we need to do that. So,
if you want to get that going tonight. But we
yes,
don't-
let's-
So moved.
Yes. We
Somebody
need to
else
do
can
that.
do
I have a motion from Chair Tankersley
Second.
and a second from Commissioner Gormley. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
All right.
Aye.
And those opposed say nay. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
So not to hold this up, if there was some other issue we need to be involved in, could we do an electronic vote or something?
So we did actually, Trina and I did talk about that. And we just hold a special meeting to do those. to get
But we
that.
can do it via Zoom. So
Right,
people don't
that's
have
what
to-
we talked about doing, is doing a virtual
Okay.
meeting. So,
Yeah, let's keep this moving.
because I think it's just, it was a glaring thing in our strategic planning document.
Okay. Yeah.
We need to resolve, get it going. Get it
Yeah.
resolved.
Wonderful, thank you. Now I think we're ready to have a March Lane property discussion.
Okay, so at the last meeting, there was a whole discussion. We were approached, or the commission was approached by the third party relating to the grant agreement that was being proposed, request for funding on that. And that sort of led into a discussion about the Miller property and the Wagaman property. So I know you've referred them to as the Marsh Lane properties, but I'll refer to them as the Miller property and the Wagaman. So those two properties that are adjacent to our location here. Essentially, the Wagaman property is adjacent to Joe Dancer Park down below us, and the Miller property is the essentially the 25 acres out on Marsh Lane. So there is a request, commission requests me to look into sort of what was the underlying history of those purchases. And as you can see in the memorandum I drafted, I went back and most of the information that I was able to get was out of the accounting records. And so as it turns out, as you can see in the documents, the properties were both bought. The Miller property was purchased first in 94 and then the Wagaman in 96. They were both purchased by the water division. So they're both assets of the water division and have been carried as assets of the water division since 94 and 96 respectively. The lease payments we get for farm is paid into the water division. So that's where they sit.
So Sam, just a little history. The bottom land was actually farmed, by the McDaniels.
Right.
And as and so the council deemed, the opportunity for, I think Kiwanis had set the park up. Anyway, there was this opportunity came along. We didn't have any money. And so the commissioners agreed to buy it, and let the city make payments on it, which they did several times, Tice Park and other things, I think.
Right. And you can see that from the rest of the
But
history that
I think all of a sudden the Wagner property comes up for sale and it's like, it works out.
Right. And as you can see in 2002, there was some additional transactions where the extension of Marsh Lane was developed. The easement was put in along the property for the sidewalk that's now out there. So that was a grant to the city of that 10-foot wide easement, which is where the sidewalk sits. It actually sits outside the right of way on the Miller properties out there on Marsh Lane. And then in 2002, also 22.4 acres were leased to the city out of the Wagaman property. That was not a partition. That's a lease. And it was, there's no termination date for it, but it was a grant of jurisdiction. So the document basically says that the jurisdiction of that 22 acres shifts from the commission to the city council. And that's where you see down below the upper parking lots of Joe Dancer, this half of the soccer fields are all actually outside of the city in the county currently. Up until recently, they were outside the UGB, but now they're in the UGB. But they sit in the county, and they're in that grant under the lease. That's 22 acres, and that was documented in it was in a formal lease document. And the map you see on
Was the house part of it? House was part of that.
house was part of it. Well, actually, no, the house wasn't part of it because the house is up higher. Yeah, but you can see that in page, I have it in the memorandum, on the last page of the memorandum, you can see the shaded area shows you what property was leased to the city out of the Wagaman, it's 60 acres. And so 22 of the 60 were essentially shifted, jurisdiction was shifted essentially over to the park department. From the water department, because that's where the rest of the property sits jurisdictionally. And that includes the street and the parking lots, all the way down to Brooks, right, down to Brooks.
And that's primarily wetlands.
Well, I would say a lot of it is in the floodplain. There is a wetland area that was actually, I think, used as a mitigation.
Yeah, the city needed this for a wetland mitigation.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
This was a lot cheaper than paying for that thing.
So you can't do anything with that property because it's used for mitigation.
The mitigation, which I think is just the area down here.
Yeah,
It's right over here.
Yeah, it's wet now.
It's wet,
right here.
but it's on this side of the soccer fields.
Got it.
If you go down there, there's kind of
Yeah.
a
Trees.
path
Yeah,
around
yeah.
it, and it's
Right.
different. Yeah.
So as far as what I can tell you about the where, what's, and whys, that's what I know. And then just the history that I provided to you
Thank you.
in this document just shows you kind of the history of the transactions between the city and Waterlight, mostly for park systems, and they were essentially Waterlight was acting as a financer. Or purchases, as Commissioner Gormley said, like, for example, the McDaniel property was purchased back over time. The Discovery Park property, same thing. There was the Waterlight paid for it, and then the city we have formal document agreements where the funding is paid back with interest, right? The Cascade Tractor property, same thing. That was financed by Waterlight. This sort of history of doing that goes all the way back into the 1960s with the Harold Taylor Park. I was kid Kent Taylor that he compared to Joe Dancer, he really didn't get a very good park. But
It was a different family.
Yeah. Anyway. Actually, even Grenfell Park up Baker Creek is an old Waterlight property. So anyway,
That's right.
so there you have it.
Very exciting history.
So
Well, thank you. I wanted to bring this back because, we, as you all remember, had this, we were approached recently about a potential sale of this property, and Commissioner Gormley, it was really clear to me that you were saying that was never the intent on the purchase of the property. And recently the property had been discussed as being for sale. It was on the MEDP website, which is, I believe, how that customer, that potential company came to look at it as a potential site. So I see this conversation as kind of clarifying some of that direction for staff, and so that it's clear whether or not that site is for sale or for lease, or not for sale or for lease. And then the other thing that's come up in regards to that site is that it was one of the two final sites recommended in the MACPAC study, which the city currently has that project on hold. But when it's time to bring that back, the final recommendations do include that site. I went back and asked Councillor Geary, because he was the council liaison, how involved Water and Light had been in that process. And he said not very, or maybe not even at all.
Not at all.
And so I asked, well, how did this come up as a potential site if it wasn't being offered by Water and Light? And he directed me to this article that Jeb Ledeen wrote, basically saying to the city, you dumb cops, there's a perfectly good site. There's a perfectly good site right here. And it was at that point that the city then went back and started evaluating this site. And so I just want to throw that out there, in that the site has also been evaluated for that, which would kind of tie in with the future potentials of it. And again, that's a project that's on hold, and it's also a project that's community informed, and it's one of multiple sites, but I wanted to be sure to bring it up as part of the overall conversation as the commission kind of gets into this.
So Remy, I'm not sure where I think I heard this. I'm not sure exactly.
I started off
No,
a couple times.
well, you had that, I know that happened, but the question is, I think I heard that the city had decided they were not interested in this site.
Yeah, and so when I asked John about it, that's what he said too, and I said, I don't know that
No, I think it was Jeff.
Yeah,
so I haven't reached out to Jeff because he has been traveling for work, but I do have the final recommendations from the MAC.
This was after the recommendation.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
we haven't taken any action since that time, so I don't know how, I mean, there could very well be a part of the story that I'm missing that I haven't been able to fill in.
Or it could have just been the preference of some of your staff too.
Yeah, or
when the people said on the committee. that was
miscommunication,
part-
or it could have been any number of things.
Predisposed
Well, they were interested in the spot down near my Linfield.
and
You know,
Linfield.
that was that kind of?
That was also one of the two final sites, but then that was kind of as far as the city got with it was. Yeah, and we
So-
had an MOU with Linfield.
Right, so that was, that's right,
So maybe that implied
yeah,
a lack of,
interest over here.
implied, right,
Right.
So many years ago, when the community center was struggling and we spent a bunch of money putting the steel superstructure in it and stuff, it was. And discussion with Jay Pearson and that, doing long range stuff, the pool, all that. We talked about potentially the city having an adjoining facility to us out here. That was just kind of a vision. And that's why I've just been really trying to protect this, just so that the city would not be shut out. Whoever had the opportunity to this property or something. And then Jeb and I got to talking about this thing, and I said the ground's ideal for putting underground parking. And at that time, I was thinking we might be able to trade some airport property for the water. So, I mean, I talked to you about that and
Right,
stuff.
yeah.
So and that's why I was trying to, please don't get rid of this. It's the city could use this at some point in time, but
But
everything
then
changes.
when we were talking about that, the message after a while came back from the city that it was different departments of the city. And so that wasn't going to happen. That the Parks Department would be one that wanted this, and it was a different department that had the property by the airport, and that they.
Right.
That just, I mean, we were very interested in that, and it just wasn't going to happen.
So I think part of my concern is that we're not clear on that property, no matter what activity may occur on that site. We're not clear as a commission, and we're not supporting you, John, when you're talking to businesses or when you're talking to interested parties. We need to get clear on that property. Is it available or is it not available? And as a good property owner, you would know the readiness of that site. So when a city looks for a site, right, as anyone, they go look at a map and they say, where are the big sites? And then they start to explore it. They don't often reach out to the property owner because it's an exploration and they want to sort of keep their cards close to their vest. That happens all the time. But I think we have to, as a commission, understand are we interested in talking to interested parties about that site? And are we agnostic about what happens there? Or are we going to be running a set of questions that identify the partner that we want on that site? So if it's a public use or a private use, or is it going to generate revenue? Is it going to be a tax property, right? Like there are a lot of questions to ask, and that we should spend some time thinking about that. Because this organization invests in an economic development partnership.
Right.
We have to be a good partner in that, where the city is exploring lots of options about a very long-term plan, right? And so if this site is not available, let's take it off. If it is, let's put it back in. But let's make sure we understand the site, the value of the site, and what we're willing to have conversations about. And I think we need to respect the city's ability to go out and sort of look at what's available when you're in your first phase of development, and silo activity and, department and people and all of that. That's all part of that exploration. But we've got to give clarity to the team here, to John, that he can be engaged in conversations and understand where the commission stands, because quite frankly, I don't know where we stand. I know where individuals stand, but as a commission, I think we should be clear about.
Well,
that.
previous commissions were fine with land banking.
Well, I've
And-
only been on the commission for 3 years and I wasn't clear on that.
But you sat as the economic development person
And I marketed
And
that
you-
property all the time.
and you identified it with John, because I mean, Tom and I, we had some conversations and I'm always been the one saying, I'm not in support of this. I mean, we had some meetings about that.
There
But
was
it's
never a
been-
final decision.
Correct, but it's kind of like we've been picking away at it, and I'll be the lone vote. So I mean, that's fine. If you want to put it on the table to say full speed ahead, go for it.
I'm not saying
I'll
it
vote no
needs to be on the
and-
market. I'm saying we need to be clear.
Yeah.
And we need to give clear direction and we need to support the team here. Because that's an interesting site. It's going to be one of the largest sites left in the industrial district. And then we're moving out to Highway 18. So it's an interesting site. There's some interesting,
Right.
contiguous to water and life. That's interesting. What does that open up? But I think we've got to get clear about it.
So Remy, I think it'd be very helpful if you could find out and let us know if the city is interested and what's the timeline? In other words,
Well, I don't think I can.
well, I mean,
do that.
just, I mean, is it something that you would know in the next 5 years or the
So I
next
mean, it's one of,
5 years?
yeah, so it's one of the 2 recommended sites, but until we get our budgetary issues straightened out and we have our income are matching our expenses without using our revenues, we've kind of tabled it. Including the monies we had set aside for MacPac work, we've already redistributed to other departments. Like we had surveying information that we sent over to do for fire districting. And I think kind of to Jody's point, we could talk about this property as a commission about if it was only to be for public use or what's the greatest good for the community without determining a specific user of the property, because maybe it would be, maybe city, maybe county, maybe nothing.
And maybe revenue generation,
Right.
right? I mean, if we just heard, we may need to look at different ways to bring, right? So I mean, I appreciate, is the city interested or not? I don't think that's important to what we need to get done now, and that is clarity around the property.
It's
Right.
important to the mayor.
Well, no, I mean, it's important, but if we could get clear about the property, we can either be really in on it or not in on
Yeah,
it.
it's
I mean,
important to me from the stand for, it's important to me in 2 different ways. One, the part that Jody mentioned in terms of just understanding the long-term planning, making sure that the commission is clear on the long-term planning for its assets. The other reason that it's important to me on the city side is when we are ready to pick up that MacPac conversation, knowing if one of the final 2 recommended sites is viable, will make a big impact on how the city proceeds at that time, whether it's in 2 years, 5 years. I better not take me 25 years to fix the budget because I won't keep getting reelected.
Fixing the budget may not make MacPac possible, right? Because as I remember the reporting on it and talking to the previous mayor, the costs, I mean, he was talking about you had to make it work, you had to have naming rights. You had to sell naming rights, so, because it was gonna be so expensive that if you divide it by the number of people in the community, it didn't pencil.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different ways to use your pencil,
yeah,
especially when you're looking at the cost of maintaining, like, tarping the
Okay, no,
roof of the
But-
swimming
but-
pool every year, and it's a not fixable
no, I
facility.
understand that, but I mean, the numbers were,
But you're
But the-
wanting to talk about MacPac specifically, and I was wanting to more bring it in as a part of the conversation, not to try to get to a goal or an end in regards to MacPac, but more that
yes.
that planning will be affected by the decision of the
Jody,
commission.
what do you need to know? What do you think the commission needs to know? Value? I mean, you
Should
said
we
we
have-
need to know, what do you need to know?
I think if there's a conversation, and I, in passing, said this to John, I think having, I can't even believe I'm gonna say this. an economic development committee that would be tasked with looking at that site, talking about what are the things that we need to know about it. What are we, I mean, you've already done the history of the site, sort of understanding the readiness of that site, and then bringing it back to the commission and say, what are the decision factors that we need to put on this site to determine if it's for sale or not, or for lease, or what the highest best use of it is.
And that's pretty easy because we already know it has water.
And we know where we're gonna get the water.
But I mean, there's already existing water line on the property. There's power right up the end of the property line. There's actually a sewer line that runs over there when we built, that runs and stubs out on that side of the road. I mean, it is.
It's shovel ready, basically.
It's almost, if you want to talk shovel ready, it is about as close as you can get.
You're selling the site.
But
So-
but I'm just saying, that's what's on the site now.
So I think the commission needs to determine what is the direction and give clarity to that site.
And what's the greatest value of that site
Well,
to the commission?
Like you were saying, does it make sense? Does it go back on the tax roll? If you build something that's going to be $100 million, is that more value to the city as tax revenue, or is it more value to build something that the city may want there? I mean, that's something that obviously at the end of the day, the city's gonna need to decide that.
But once it's gone.
It's gone. You're right. But then, you know, you got to look at the other factors. It's right next to the biggest park the city has. And so logically, it makes a lot of sense for something for the city.
Yeah.
And I think that's the struggle is it makes sense for economic development, but it also makes sense for something for the city.
But then you've got the Waterman property
Right.
that sort of makes sense for the city too.
It does. And for us,
Or
because there's property that we could utilize for
Well,
expansion on that.
we
side,
wouldn't
too.
have to sell that part, but I mean,
Right, we
the
could split
part
it.
that goes that way or.
Right.
So I would like to know what it's worth.
So that was my question. Do we do an appraisal? We find somebody to do an appraisal?
I think that's fair.
At one time, I think there was enough ground that housing could have been built. And we talked about, I mean,
Right, yeah.
these lots, you know.
But the problem there is that the only access is off Fifth, which isn't improved right now. Because that's the backside that way. And then the other side is off the,
Unless you design it differently. I mean, but the park gets shut down because of the flooding is what.
right.
Yeah.
And I
It was
think
just
the
all
issue,
sorts of things talking.
yeah, the issue there is that dip right there.
Yeah.
Because that's where it floods.
I'm primarily thinking of the Miller property.
Mhm.
I'm not.
Yeah, so I mean, we're like, he's talking about, when he said. It makes sense that this, you know, it's next to the park.
Yeah.
Well, we've got that's next to the park too, so I mean,
And that's why we leased some of that property to the city. Because it made sense to expand the park.
well, they needed the help, yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess those are the kinds of conversations to have, to not isolate the conversations just amongst the city or amongst Water and Light, to elevate those conversations so that there's dialogue happening and giving you certainty that the commission would be interested in looking at X, Y, and Z. I don't think it's fair to have a business come in and present on a site that they've been investigating, that they're, you know, trying, I mean, there's a lot there to unpack. But they drove in, they sat down, they presented, they thought they were giving us information that we were going to be interested in. And I think we threw a loop at them.
Well, I was shocked they made the presentation because I didn't realize it was for sale.
So I was not.
Yeah.
So there's
See,
the
you're
rub.
involved in it. And
I'm
that's-
not involved in it.
You have been involved in it previously.
But the commission, we had a meeting where the commission was saying, let's look at all options.
Yeah.
And that's why we were looking
Yeah.
at
Yeah.
that.
And I think
you
that-
didn't just go off on your own.
No.
You compete to market that property.
We've
Yeah.
been talking, so I think let's get clear as a commission and at least agree what we can agree upon.
Right.
And as I recall, the message before was. We care about what's there.
Right.
And it wasn't. I think the message was to the right party at the right price. It probably is for sale, but it's got to be. Now, let me ask a question here, Jody. If you were the city of McMinnville, you talk about the dialogue here, what they're going to do. unless you want the tax revenue and you don't even get half of the tax revenue from it. Because the school district gets a chunk, the county gets a chunk and all that. Unless you're thinking about the tax revenue from putting in the property tax rolls. I mean, wouldn't you say, well, gee, I'd rather have it be available in case I want it sometime?
Well,
I mean, isn't that the city's natural response?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay,
But
good.
I'm not the city, so I don't know. I think what we need to be is a good partner. And if the city has identified this as a site, then we sit down and we say, okay, what is it that you're looking for? And we'd be interested in continuing that conversation, or absolutely not. We are not interested in having a community recreation facility next. It's dangerous, for whatever reason, right? But I think you have to have that conversation. But I don't think we can assume for the city. And I also think that we need to be realistic. What the MACPAC's talking about is a multi-year process. And the first part of it is you explore what sites are available. And then the second part is, okay, what would it look like on those sites? And then you think about the phased approach. Then you think about what is the contractual relationship between the property owner and the city. I mean, there's a lot of things to unpack there. And the time it's going to take the city to get the budget the way that you want it to be, that's one piece. But the other piece is this is long-term planning. And so are we interested in being a part of that conversation? And if this property is in play and we're interested, then maybe we as a commission say, you know what, it's important to us that we give the city time, but we want to be part of those conversations. We want to explore what that looks like. And maybe it pans out and maybe it doesn't, but we'll be better for it because we'll understand that site better. That's how I would look at it. But I think we just need to get clear on what we have, what our intention is, and support the team here so that they know what they're doing.
And the other thing we need to talk about is in the past, we have sold stuff to the city for cost. And I think at one point, I think I was told, again, I think it was by Scott, the previous mayor, that at one point MacPac thought we would give them the property. But
So maybe that
do that and
so maybe that becomes a monument for us. The property has value and we cannot donate it or give it away. That becomes a statement, right? But we need to ground ourselves in the conversation about the property, not the activity on the property. Right. So what are the things that are important to us as a commission?
Yeah, but I think I've heard it over the years say that the activity on the property is important too. Because we don't want a mobile home park there. We don't want.
Okay, then, but those are statements we can make. But I think if we say it's going to be the MacPac activity, that's what I'm saying.
We can't do that because we can't.
Right.
I mean, they may want to be somewhere else.
Yeah, I feel like we're going down a lot of rabbit holes here because in my opinion, some people came to the last meeting and made a presentation about a really interesting new business in town, creating a lot of jobs and a lot of opportunity. And we have a lot of resources to support that kind of a business. And it was, I thought it was really interesting, and it's a whole, brings a lot of things to McMinnville. But I think to Jody's point, it's like, we need to know whether they had any reason to come to the room or not. Is it a piece of property that we're interested in discussing to sell or lease, or is it not? And I think that that's the first question that needs to get answered. What the list of things that we're willing to sell it for use as is part of that conversation. But I think the first part of the conversation is, is that property for sale or not? So how do we get to that point as a commission? We need to put this on a.
Do you have a recommendation, John, on how we might go about exploring this?
So I think the first thing I like is we should get an appraisal, because we haven't done that. I don't think we've ever done that. And we have no idea what the value is. But I think that's one step. But I also think during that time, we should be having conversations. And I'm not sure we need the MacPac part. I mean, I think the part we need to have with the city is there any interest? Yes or no?
Yes.
If there's interest, because like you said, it's a long-term thing. So, you're talking about the budget and making sure this is way longer than that.
Yeah.
And Water and Light has for years done things with the city, as Sam was saying, showing, hey, we've done these transactions, whatever. If the city's saying, no, we're not really interested, then I think that tells us, okay, we need to go down a different direction
Yeah.
and
That's
say,
good.
hey.
If we
this-
choose to do something.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe the commission just continues to hold it, but
So what's the process that the commission goes through to get to these answers and to
it's
get an
having these
agreement?
At some point, you determine that it's a surplus property.
Yeah, and what I'm kind of hearing is the commission's not ready to move on it at all without more information.
Right.
So essentially, it's
I think,
not on the market.
right, and that's what I
Um,
told the MADP, and so then and that's why I'm saying, well, if we're truly serious, well, let's do an appraisal, let's figure out what it's worth. And I think we can have conversations as a longer term thing with the city. Not necessarily MacPac yet, but just, is there truly an interest? If
Yeah.
there really is, then let's have those conversations.
And
I
who
think
would you
that's
have
fair.
those conversations with, Remy?
I would think Remy and Jeff. and
Yeah, I
Okay.
think we just have them in leadership meetings
Okay.
and I
Adam
mean,
and-
my gut is that the city's we're not gonna wanna say, no, we'll never have an interest in that property. But I also feel like the relationship between the organizations should be one in which if
we can
this
have the
organization
conversation.
is land banking something, right, and it's a benefit to the city and the community, then the city should be able to come and say, hey, would you consider parting with this property? If Water and Light doesn't have its own plans for it,
Right.
and it appears at this time that Water and Light has no plans for it. It hasn't been master planned. It's not an area of interest for the expansion that Water and Light needs to do. I think your report says that there's no future need for the water or the light division for it. So it sounds to me like it's more in a holding pattern until we know.
But on the other hand, we have some cash needs that
We're gonna be coming.
dwarf what we saw before. That are coming up, the transmission line from the Willamette site, the transmission line down just on the water side, because
Right.
this is a water asset, say nothing electrification stuff, but.
So that would lead into the appraisal then, right?
Right.
That-
Yeah.
To see whether this makes, I mean, maybe it's not worth enough to make a difference, but maybe it is, and if it is, then. Then it may not be appropriate for the ratepayers to have us land bank it.
Right.
If we don't need to build something on, and it would generate money that would help pay for these other things, including the two more bays in the water treatment plant. So I mean, what have I talked about $100 million there, John?
Yep. That's not what it is.
I'm not sure it's gonna. be
No, but I mean, it would be a percentage of it.
No, not the property, but the cost. No, you're right.
It could become a seed fund for them, yeah.
So what I'm hearing is
It's good.
probably start
Get an
looking for the
appraisal.
appraisal and maybe talk to Jeff and Adam and you, and maybe we have a conversation and just really see if there's really truly an interest or if it's just, because I think the way the commission thinks and the staff here is, it's always long-term. I mean, it's not today, it's not next
Right.
year, it's
Right.
15, 20 years. Is the vision there for doing something there in that time frame? And if it is, well, then let's have the conversation about how we get there.
Yeah, and
Because
then,
we're just kind of doing
I
this.
like that.
Well, and we have a variety of needs of the
Right.
city, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
not only SmackPack, we have massive housing needs,
Right.
obviously, in the community.
Right.
We are just about out of industrial land.
And so,
MIT is out of industrial land.
right,
and one might be selling, they're selling their last piece.
They're selling their last
Yeah.
piece. So there's a lot of different community needs.
and just having those conversations to see if, okay, does it make sense? And
Yeah.
because it's already zoned industrial, it's already got water, it's already got sewer, it's already got power.
It's a pretty site.
And Jody's point of the property tax revenues for the next 15 years, if somebody puts a very expensive building. on
$100
that,
million building or, building on that, what happens? I mean, what does that look like to the city?
Yeah, so the taxes on properties I'm more interested in. Okay, well, then it sounds like this commission is following the intent of the commission when it took the property on, which is basically to land bank it until more information is gathered.
And we'll start. You know,
So just like the conversation with Jamie tonight, talking about the contract expiring in 28, the next one going to 48 and that, there's so much unknown. We sit here today and say, well, we're never going to expand,
well,
but we don't know that. I mean, what's McMinnville going to be in 2048? Will we have a different utility resource that
could, yeah.
there could be some only widget that we're in the
We
market?
still, we're talking right now about, the expansion of this facility. We're not even looking at using the pieces the empty pieces we have now for those expansions. So we still have room even on this site to grow. And we probably have somewhere, roughly probably 4 acres that we haven't even developed on top of what we have already fenced. So there is room here. Plus, we still have the Logman property, the piece over here. So one of the things I was thinking about is at some point, if we do some type of solar thing, where would you put that here? Well, you'd probably put it right along here because this faces south. And that's what you do.
So one of my,
So just thinking about,
Kind of thinking about that.
Yeah.
one of my aspirations for the property sits out on Riverside Drive when Kim Carr was here, was a community garden.
Oh, really?
I mean, that's when service clubs were still doing stuff, but community gardens and it's for the community, for Whitecap and that kind of stuff. But I said, just give me the go ahead. I'll get the water in and all that kind of stuff. I never could get ever agree to doing it.
So we've talked about that. We're starting our 20-year master planning on parks, and some of the direction that's been specifically given is for that we'd like to see incorporation of community / edible gardens, but maybe around using some of our other park, and we're too early to say what or where it would be, but there are some park spaces that were acquired and they are lightly maintained, like
not mow it once in a while.
yeah, well, they get mowed, but I mean, there's some, there's a park even near where I live that's a kind of postage stamp sized, and it's just a rectangle of grass. But it's a park, so trying to also use part of the master planning is that we're hoping will be that we use some existing park spaces that aren't currently being used or aren't being used to their best ability. And I'm hoping to see that kind of thing come out of that master planning process.
Well, I almost had Sam's
But no
Kiwanis Lions Club talked into growing giant pumpkins there. As a revenue source, remember? I said I'd furnish the pallets and you guys would grow.
What about Christmas tree?
More fun. Anyway, okay.
Okay, well, wonderful. Thank you, everybody. Great discussion. And general manager comments.
So I have 2. Tomorrow we're launching our high school internship program.
Oh.
So we have 8 students from the high school, 5 from the ESA program, 2 from the FAB pathway, and 1 from the business marketing. And we'll be doing the emergency filtration trailers. That's the project they're going to. So we're going to start that tomorrow morning.
Cool.
So I think that'll be pretty. And I've already thought about future projects. So I think I have a couple other future projects that we can line up for that to keep it going and maybe expand at some point. But to me, I actually went through a program like that as a high school kid.
Maybe we could let the newspaper know.
I've already, that was the other piece. I've already talked to Starla and I told her, give us a couple weeks so we can get this thing kind of ironed out and lined up, and then we'll have them come in and we can do a whole.
When all else fails, you can buy an ad.
Yeah,
That's my I said for years.
that's true. But
You want to put in-
she called me because the school district had said something.
Okay.
So she.
But in the end, this might be worth us spending some money to promote it.
Oh, yeah.
The show. I mean, but the sad thing is that the readership is just. Yeah, so it's the fight of.
Newspapers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Come out and do a TikTok.
Oh, well, we've talked about, and that may be another thing.
I mean,
You're right, because we talked about that, and that might be another subject we want to do is have the kids do some TikTok, not
That's
just
how they
TikTok, but
communicate.
videos.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
I
And
don't
so,
think Dad wants TikTok in our computer system.
no, we won't do that.
He just fell over.
Still there?
We're watching.
So the other item is up at Haskins. Let's see, Ryan took off, but The drain valve for the reservoir is damaged and I may have to declare an emergency to get it fixed. And that's basically a valve at the bottom of the reservoir that they use to regulate the red level of the reservoir. And it's cast, and I think it was cracked or was it fractured? It's cracked, so we're gonna have to get a contractor in to pull it and then weld it. And it's cast, so it's gonna be pretty hard to weld, so they gotta pull it out of the hole to get it done. And it's 300 feet into the reservoir, so.
John. Bill Sharp, what's that guy on TV? Who's that?
Sharper image?
No, the stuff he shows.
Oh, yeah.
Taping a house up and it works. I mean, hey,
Yeah.
okay, so we have somebody go in the water and do it or?
Well, it's
drain?
drained right now, and that's how we found it.
Oh, it is.
So, normally we drain
Better get on it
baskets
right
every
now.
year, so that's what we gotta get on it right.
We can't replace it or is it too hard?
Well, it'd be too long, but too much time.
There's not, how big a valve is it? 14?
40 inch, 48
40
inch,
oh.
48 inch.
Forget it. That's not on the shelf anywhere.
What's that? Right, but the actual. Yeah, so it's,
Maybe you said Portland have one they want to get rid of.
yeah, yeah. So, but anyway, we're gonna have to do something soon, and so I think, did he have a contractor come up today? So hopefully we're gonna get a quote here.
So you'd be declaring an emergency based
So,
on the cost and the ability to
time.
exercise. based on-
We're using the bypass setup.
Yeah, we're using the diversion right now, so, and we don't want to leave the reservoir drain for
Are
too
you
long
open
because
Have
that.
you ever seen the diversion?
I don't know, but
We can actually. Needs the city to show the diversion that goes back to
Around, it goes around the reservoir.
all kinds of around stuff.
This is the new one.
Pretty-
right?
pretty
It
neat.
used to be. it was been
We've
replaced, right?
upgraded it.
It was replaced 2002. Is that when that one was? put in?
Eric and a bunch did it, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
About the same time we raised McGuire, right?
I think so. Yeah, maybe just a little ahead of it or something, but about that time. So, but
There's not.
it's gonna, once we get it, we gotta go. We gotta get it fixed right then and there. We gotta go with the contractor to get it done. So that was my 2 items.
thank you.
Okay.
Any commissioner comments?
No.
And has everybody had an opportunity to review the financial highlights?
Yes.
Great, and with that, I will ask general counsel to read us into executive session.
All right, tonight we're going to go into executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub F to consider information and records that are exempt from public disclosure under ORS 192.355.23 relating to identifying security measures, individual building and information processing. We'll also follow with a session, executive session pursuant to ORS 192.660 sub 2 sub F to consider information or records that are exempt by law from public inspection under ORS 192.355 sub 4 and ORS 193 or 192.355 sub 9 relating to confidential privilege records, ORS 40.225 attorney-client communications. If we have any media with us, stay in the executive session, they're cautioned not to share items that are shared and are spoken about in executive session in the public realm. I understand tonight we are not going to come back into open session because there will be no other actions by the commission. So when we leave executive session or we go into executive session, the public meeting will end and we will not return for adjournment.
Okay.
If
So-
the only one we need is Mark for the first one, and then